Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Water, Wastewater, Utilities, and Telecommunications Companies, Consumer Protections and Your Rights. This week is National Consumer Protection Week, and the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff is hosting a number of webinars throughout the week to inform consumers and make sure that they have the resources to make better informed decisions and keep themselves safe out in the world. So, especially when they're dealing with industries that we at our agency directly are involved with. So just want to go through a couple of housekeeping items before we get started with the presentations. So first of all, everyone entered the webinar on mute. And if you could just remain on mute throughout the presentation, that'll help to decrease background noise. And then we are recording the webinar. So if you have to jump off or you get a call or anything like that, feel free to go ahead and do what you have to do. And you can watch what you missed later on. And we'll send that link out, as well as we'll send out the slides from today's presentation to everyone that was registered. So you will get a copy of the presentation. We do have a chat box here in the Zoom platform. So if you navigate to that chat box, you should be able to open it and put in any questions that you have during the presentation. I'll be helping to monitor that chat. And if there's a question that I can answer, I'll answer that directly in the chat. Or if it's pertinent to what we're talking about at the time, I may interject and get our presenters to answer the question before we move on to the next topic. So with that, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Landon Masters. I'm the Community Outreach and Communications Manager for the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff, or the ORS. As I mentioned, this week is Consumer Protection Week, and Consumer Protection Week is coordinated by the Federal Trade Commission to encourage consumers to take full advantage of their consumer rights and make better informed decisions. This is held at the 1st of March each year. We at the ORS kind of put our own spin on it to make sure that consumers are informed in the different industries that we work with. We at the ORS were actually created as an agency in 2004, and we represent the consumers of investor-owned utilities in South Carolina, specifically the public interest for consumers, which means the continued investment in reliable and high quality service. So making sure that consumers are getting the best service at the lowest possible rate. So the Public Service Commission is who we go before in cases like a rate case, and the PSC is the state agency that sets the utilities rate. So we help to do that investigation and look into what the company is presenting before the commission, and then present those findings before the commission, where they then make a decision. So the commission will then release an order, put together an order of what the actual final decision is. So we do a lot here in the ORS. We cover a lot of different sectors, including what we're talking about today: water, wastewater, and telecom. We also cover electric and natural gas, utilities, as well as the transportation sector, household good movers, those sorts of movers, and transportation companies, transportation network companies as well. But we also house our state energy office, which looks at clean energy, renewable energy, energy efficiency, and clean transportation, as well as our equipment distribution program, which helps to provide equipment to those that have hearing or speech challenges and need equipment to better communicate over the phone. We have some great presenters today to talk about water, wastewater, and telecom. Takesha did a great presentation yesterday on electric and natural gas utilities. So if you missed that, you can watch the recording on our website. But first, she's going to kick it off with water, wastewater, and then we're going to move on to Casey Sims after that and shift gears a little bit into telecom. But with that, I'll turn it over to Keisha.
Thank you so much, Landon, for that introduction. And I want to take the moment to thank everyone for taking time out of your schedule to join us today for our presentation. As Landon said, my name is Takesha Waller, and I am an investigator here with the Office of Regulatory Staff, specifically in our Consumer Services Department. And what I wanted to do is kind of give some information on water and wastewater consumer protections so that we can help our consumers. The purpose of this presentation is to educate the consumer. We get a lot of questions here in consumer services, and a lot of it is things where consumers simply don't know what their rights are. They don't know what they're entitled to. They don't know what they are to expect. They don't know what they can do as far as going to their utility when they have questions, concerns, or issues. And what we wanted to do is get the information out and hopefully be able to educate consumers enough so that they know how to approach their utility and kind of the direction to go in order to get the results that they are ultimately seeking, which is to get their problem resolved. And we think by giving this information, we will empower them to be able to know what to expect and what they can utilize. So with that, I'll go ahead and begin my presentation. You have the right to establish service, and I touched on that because a lot of consumers want to stop people from have had issues with people connecting service, and the utility cannot not allow someone to apply for service. Now that's different from them actually being able to connect the service, but everyone has the ability to apply for service. Now, by applying for service, though, the consumer has to give the utility the opportunity to come onto the property. They may need that access, and we want consumers to understand when you are applying for service with a utility, they may have to come on the property for some type of an inspection. They may have to come in to make sure that there's not a safety issue in place when they're coming in to establish your service. Also, with that application, there's information that they'll have to do to determine if a deposit is needed. Most people are not aware that there may be a deposit required from the utility in order to establish that service, and the regulations do allow for them to charge a deposit. Now, for the deposit amounts, that may vary. You can have a max deposit amount that's equal to 2 months or 60 days if you're a new customer. But if you're an existing customer, then the two highest consecutive bills can determine the amount of deposit. And we often have consumers that will say, well, they don't understand why the utility can charge a deposit for their service. Well, the utility has to be able to protect themselves in the event that there is an issue. So they may impose a deposit in order to secure that account in order to establish the service for that location. So with them applying for service, you also want to touch on if a consumer decides they want to terminate the service. You can't just move out and just assume if the company is no longer billing you that they will terminate the service. You have to let the company know if you are requesting to have your service terminated as well. Next slide, Landon. And with the disconnection, a lot of people are confused as to what the actual regulations are stating and what the rules are for the disconnection notices. You have the right to a written notice from the utility prior to your services being disconnected. Now, the time frame of that disconnection is not less than 30 days prior to the termination of service. The utility shall send a notice of termination to that particular customer who may be affected by a disconnection. Once that initial 30-day notice has expired, the utility shall post a second notice by certified mail letting that customer know. We get a lot of questions in reference to whether or not the utility can send a certified letter. Yes, the utility can send a certified letter letting consumers know that their service is in jeopardy of being disconnected. That way they're able to track that information is sent. It's actually for the protection of both the consumer as well as the utility, because when that certified letter has been mailed, there is a track record notifying both the company that they have notified that customer and also the consumer that it has been sent. Now, in consumer services, we get a lot of calls because consumers want to think that because they got the notice that there's a certified letter, but they refuse to go to the mailbox or wherever it is to pick up that letter, that it makes it not valid. And that's actually not the case. The company is not responsible for whether or not you pick up that notification. They're responsible for sending it out. So the fact that you don't go and pick it up does not allow you to not have to suffer the consequences for the fact that that notice has been sent out. In the event that the service is disconnected, a reconnect fee of $250 can be imposed on an account to reconnect. And that $250 would be if there's not an elder valve device in place. If there is, that fee is now dropped down to $35. If there's also a deferred payment agreement in place, and I'll kind of touch more on deferred payment agreements a little later in the presentation, but if there's a deferred payment in place and it is broken, the utility may terminate service upon 15 days written notice. So that changes a little bit because you have been given a little additional time being on some type of payment agreement with the utility. Once that disconnection notice is made, or the disconnection, excuse me, has taken place, the notification of this disconnection is sent both to DHEC and to the Office of Regulatory Staff. Now, we briefly talked about payment plans, and with what's happening right now, we're in the midst of a pandemic. People are going through a lot of tough times right now. So we do want to touch on payment plans with the utilities. As a utility customer, you have the right to set up a payment plan before your service is disconnected. What we try to urge consumers is if you know that you're in a financial strait, or there may be the potential that you're not able to meet the financial obligation for your services, the sooner the better to reach out to the consumer. So if you know that you're having some type of an issue, reach out as soon as possible so that there may be some options available to you, especially if you're contacting the Office of Regulatory Staff for assistance. The sooner that you contact us, the more likely we would be able to assist with getting some assistance for you. As I stated before, deferred payment agreements are defined as deferred payment has plans, excuse me, a deferred payment plan requires that the consumer keep the account current and they pay no less than 1/6 of the outstanding balance. So they're able to take that balance, break that up over a period of time, but you're also responsible for keeping that balance current, which means you'll have a particular amount that they've broken up plus your current bill in order to not get you in even worse financial straits and to keep your account current. A deferred payment agreement is also defined as any agreement to extend or defer payment cutoff by more than 5 working days. So we wanted to just be clear on what a payment plan is considered to be. The explanation of your bill, we are currently or constantly urging our consumers to make sure that they're taking a look at their bill. While the utility will make every effort to make sure that the billing is correct for a customer, there are times when there are errors that may occur on a customer's bill. And so that is why we're constantly urging consumers, take a look at your bill. If there's something on the bill that looks a little off or that you don't understand what it means, you have every right to contact your utility to ask, what does this specific charge mean? Why do I have this specific charge on my bill? What can I do about it? And if there are things on there that aren't right, then they have the opportunity to explain to you what it is and to correct it at that time. But this slide here will explain what is actually on the bill and what you are to expect. So as an explanation, you have to write to have your bill explained. On your bill, you can expect to see that the bill will show the readings at the beginning and the end of your period so that you know what time period you're actually being billed for. It will give you the date that your meter is read. When you have this meter read date, you have a better expectation of the time period that you can expect your bill to be read each month, because there's a sequence and the company usually stays within that sequence so that your bill is read around the same time each month. You have the date of billing and the latest date which the payment can be paid without incurring some type of penalty. They'll have the balance due, the past due, or a date that you can pay this before some late fee is incurred on the bill. It'll tell you the kind of metrics that are being used on your bill so that you know how they are measuring your usage on that particular bill. It'll tell you the rate schedule so that you can verify that you're being paid, that you're paying the correct rate for your usage. If, for instance, there is some issue with your meter, say there's a stop meter or there was a problem with the company being able to get an accurate reading or a factual reading of your bill, then you have the ability to see that that bill was estimated for some reason. Or if there was some issue with your billing, that will be marked on your bill as well. And then, of course, you have the notice that'll tell you what the total amount due is for your billing and why you have that amount. As I said previously, there are times when there are errors on your bill. When you have machines that are doing things, errors do occur. I wouldn't tell you that they don't. So sometimes there will be an instance where there may be an overcharge on a consumer bill. But as a consumer, you have the right to an adjustment if the utility has overcharged you on your bill. But in the same token, the utility also has the ability to correct if they have undercharged you for some reason on the bill as well. And we want to make sure that consumers are aware that this may happen and that it is allowed by the PSC's rules and regulations. We also want to make sure that consumers are well aware that they have the right to contact their utility. If there is something that happens, say there's some leak or some break, the utility would have some after hours call number, after hours contact, someone that they can contact in after hours to reach their utility in the event of some type of an emergency, some type of unscheduled interruption, or some problem that may exist on the utility system. The utility provides a number for the consumer to reach out, to reach somebody, to let them know that this is an issue or to check what's happening with that particular utility. Another thing that we wanted to touch on, and it's not in my slides, but I wanted to just kind of give some information on, especially since we are talking about Consumer Protection Week, and we're seeing an increase of this particular thing in some of our utilities, and that's scams. We want to make sure that everyone is being diligent, that they're being careful and being mindful that scams are actually out in place now and that people are capitalizing on scams being out against utility companies. So what we are urging consumers, if someone comes to your home unsolicited, telling you anything about your utility, that you have some rights in those particular situations. You have the right to ask for ID. If that person is coming to your home and they're telling you that they are from a particular utility, you have the right to ask for ID from that particular person. If once you see that ID and you're still not comfortable, you have every right to close your door, lock your door, and call your utility company. They will be able to advise you that, yes, we do have employees in the area, they're surveying for this or they're surveying for that, or no, we do not have anyone in your local area right now. And at that point, you contact your local law enforcement. Any unsolicited calls that you may get from someone claiming to be from your utility, do not give out personal information, banking information, or even account information. If they are in fact from your utility, they will already have that information. So if you get some strange unsolicited call, never feel offended by telling them that I'm going to call the utility, or simply hanging up. Call your utility and verify if they have actually called you. People coming in with equipment and or repair. When in doubt, reach out to your utility company. We have heard a number of scams where people are coming door to door claiming to be selling different types of products that will help with different types of things, and the utility company has no idea that these people are circulating. When in doubt, always reach out to your utility directly. This is another one, and you don't usually see it so much in this industry, but I do want to make sure that we are on alert with it. Claims to give preferential treatment for reconnection in the event that there's some type of storm or some natural occurrence that comes out and utilities are out for a moment. Never pay anyone for preferential treatment for reconnection of services. The utility companies are working diligently when there are outages or breaks in the area to get those repaired, and you should never have to pay anyone a fee to get your services reconnected in any particular order. Never pay anyone for any claims that they can get you reconnected any sooner than what the company is already doing. And in addition to that, like I said, never feel awkward asking questions, never feel awkward reaching out to your utility. They will answer the questions that you have. It's better to be safe and it really be a utility employee than to be sorry and it be someone who's not actually affiliated with the utility, but someone that means you some harm. Next slide, Linda. And as we were stating with the scams before, also with complaints, you have the right to ask questions or complaints, and you have the right to have those thoroughly and promptly investigated by your utility. A lot of times consumers will reach out and they've never contacted the utility in order to have that issue resolved. That will be your first line of defense, to reach out to your utility company directly. A lot of times they may not even know that you're having this particular issue and they have not had the opportunity to correct it or to see what is actually going on. So we urge consumers, let that first line of defense be directly with your utility company. In the event that you speak with the utility company and you have not been able to get a resolution to whatever your problem or your issue may be, you have the right to contact the ORS Consumer Services, which is our department. And at that point, we will contact the utility and see if we can resolve that issue for you in a non-formal basis. So you contact us, you explain to us what that situation will be. We take your information, we reach out to the utility and try to get a resolution to the issue or get the deferred payment plan if that's what you may be seeking, or get that a best option for you. In the event that the ORS Consumer Services unfortunately may not be able to assist you, then you have another level of protections that are afforded to you. You have the right to file what's called a formal complaint with the Public Service Commission and request a hearing if you're unable to resolve the issue by the means that I spoke previously, going directly to your utility or coming directly to the ORS. And that form you can actually find on the Commission's website, and it is titled a formal complaint. And you can, again, fill that out on their site, submit it there, or you can have it printed out and handwrite it if you don't have access to a computer, and mail that back in to the Public Service Commission. And with that, that is my presentation on water and wastewater, and we'll turn it back over to Landon.
Awesome. Thank you so much to Keisha. I said on our last webinar, she is really the guru of all this stuff. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat, and I'm sure that Takesha would be able to help answer those. And if she doesn't know the answer, she definitely knows who knows the answer. So like I said, continue to put those questions in the chat box or save them till the end. If you want to unmute yourself at the end of the presentation, then we'll do a Q&A then. But now I'm going to turn it over to Casey Sims with our telecom department. And she is going to transition us into telecommunications consumer protections. So Casey, take it away.
Totally forgot I had to unmute. Thank you, Landon. As Landon mentioned, my name is Casey Sims, and I am the Telecom Services Manager here at the Office of Regulatory Staff. And my role here is to provide outreach for the program called the South Carolina Equipment Distribution Program that ORS administers, which provides phone equipment to individuals who live with a hearing or speech challenge. And then in addition to that, I am also the new liaison between ORS and the telecom companies. And so with that, I'm going to get started today. I'm going to speak a few minutes about consumer rights when it comes to telecommunications. All right. So as a consumer, you have the right to establish service. You have the right to establish telephone service. It is good to know that when you are a consumer, you may be asked to establish your credit. And with that, you may be asked to put a deposit down. The company may be looking into payment history, things like that. So it is good to know that you could be asked to put a deposit down to establish service. Also, you nor anyone in your household should be indebted to the company to get service turned on. And also, you would have to provide reasonable access and necessary access to your property for the telecom utility to be able to turn on service or maintenance or things like that. You would have to be willing to provide access to your property. Also, the use for the utility wouldn't be hazardous or dangerous in any way. And then you, like I said, may be required to post a deposit to get service cut on. Next slide, please. All righty. So you also have the right to know what services are available in your area. So the South Carolina Telecommunications and Broadband Association website does have a map available, and it does list the ILEC telephone companies that are available in the areas throughout the state of South Carolina. So if you did happen to have a question about who does serve your area, that is a really great resource to look at. A lot of folks aren't familiar with what phone company does serve their area. That's very common. So that's a great resource to check out. We also, on our website, the Office of Regulatory Staff, we do have a list of the telephone companies in South Carolina, the ILECs and CLECs as well. So if you were wondering who those companies are, those are also listed. All right, Landon, thank you. Next slide. Okay, as a consumer, you have the right to a telephone directory. A lot of folks aren't aware that these are still a thing, but they are. You have the right to request this. Each phone company is required to have a directory made, and whether that be electronic or published a physical version, you have the right to request that. And if you do need one, you can contact your phone company and they can send you one. Obviously, this would display the names, addresses, and phone numbers of the customers with that company. If you have the right to have your number and information not listed in that upon your request. So if you aren't comfortable with that and you want to make sure your information is not listed in that directory, that's absolutely fine. You can call and request that with your phone company. And also, if you notice that the information is incorrect in the directory, your information is incorrect, you have the right to contact that company and first of all, make sure that in the files that they have for you, that all of your information is correct. That would be step one. And step two would be to put in that request that, yes, your information is incorrect in the directory and you would like to request that that is fixed. Definitely for the next publication that comes around, to make sure that that information is correct. Next slide.
And Casey, wanted to make sure that folks know, and you may have already mentioned this and I missed it, but that we are talking about landline service. And a lot of people would maybe question and say, well, it's all cell phone numbers.
Yes, so that is a great point. As we're talking about your telecommunications bill of rights, we are referring to landline. Telephone, or excuse me, cell phone is a whole different ball game. And so these that we're going over is in reference to landline service. Thank you. Alrighty, you have the right to pay your bill without incurring late payment charges. So basically, if you're paying your bill on time, the phone company is not allowed to bill you a late charge. So you shouldn't be billed a late charge. You're paying on time. So they shouldn't be charging you a late fee. If the balance is brought forward, a maximum of 1.5% may be added. So if there is a late payment made, 1.5% can be charged to that bill to cover the cost of collection and carrying over of that service. Next slide. All right. So you have the right to a timely and accurate bill. If you're not receiving your bill on time or an accurate bill, you have the right to approach the company to go over that bill. And I know Takesha was doing a great job of explaining that you have the right to have your bill explained to you by the utility. So if you have a lot of questions or you're not sure what a specific charge was, I know, just to give you an example, sometimes when even I have gotten a paper bill in the mail and I'm looking at the breakdown of charges and I see something that wasn't there last time but is there for this month, I always call and I ask about it. Normally I'm wrong and that charge should be there, but I do call and I ask about that because you do have the right to have that explained to you. And so that's good to know, and definitely a good thing to do, not only to make sure that you're being charged the correct amount, but it helps educate you. So it's very good to know and to see what you are paying for. And definitely ask questions about the bill too. Next slide. Alrighty, you can use any long distance carrier, even if the long distance carrier that you would like to select is different than your local carrier that you use, your local phone company, you have the right to that. You can choose a different long distance carrier as long as they do operate in your service area. They do not have to be the same as your local service provider. You have the right to make that choice yourself. Next slide. Alrighty, you have the right to written notice from the telephone utility prior to being disconnected for non-payment. Takesha also did a great job explaining this. It's a little different with telecom, but you do have the right to written notice before your service is cut off. With phone service or telephone service, the written notice includes that you have 5 days to make a settlement on your account. With long distance, it would be 2 days. But the key thing here is to know that you have the right to written notice. The telecom utility cannot just cut service with no explanation. You have the right to get a written notice before that happens. Next slide. Okay, for overcharges, you have the rights for an adjustment on your bill. If the telephone company overcharges you or even undercharges you, you have the right for that adjustment. I know it goes both ways. Again, like Takesha was saying, if you are overcharged, the phone company may, however they work that out with you, whether it's a credit into the next month or something like that, you have the right to that. You have a right to that adjustment. However, that does go both ways if you're overcharged, but as well as if you're undercharged. So if you're not charged the amount that you really owed, they have the right as well to send you a correct bill. So that is good to know as well. And that does follow along with the PSC's rules and regulations. So it's important to be aware of that. But like I said, it definitely is good practice to check your bills monthly and make sure that you are understanding your charges, what you're paying for, and if not, to contact the utility. And I would also just encourage to keep that communication open between you and the utility. because, the utility is there to help you, and they should be answering your questions. They should be willing to answer any questions and go above and beyond to help you and make you feel comfortable. So I would definitely encourage you to communicate if you have a question about your bill. Next slide. Okay, you have the right to contact the telephone utility at all hours. We know emergencies happen, and we know that obviously having a phone is dire these days. You should definitely have a phone at your beck and call 24 hours a day. So in the case of an emergency or any interruption of your service, you should definitely be able to contact the utility. They should have a customer service number or a number listed on the bill or on their website. That is a good number for you to reach them at all hours of the day. And that should be available for the utility. Next slide. Okay, if you have complaints or questions, you have the right to have those thoroughly investigated by the telephone utility. They should be looking into those complaints that you have, any concerns, complaints, those should be properly investigated. A good resource is to contact ORS Consumer Services. Takesha does a great job and her team helping with these complaints and looking into things, working with the utility and working with the consumer to get things resolved and do all that we can do to help out. Sometimes, it is good to have someone helping, just a third party that's that understands a little bit more of what's going on and kind of the lingo and all of that. It helps to have someone on your side. So you have the rights to that. If ORS Consumer Services is working with you and the utility has been working with you, but or you're unable to resolve it between everyone, you do have the right to file a formal complaint with the PSC. And so that is your right as a consumer. But they should thoroughly investigate your complaint first. The utility should. Next slide. Alrighty. And lastly, we all know, as we're living in today's world, scams and identity theft is just a big thing going on right now. I get calls all the time from numbers that I don't recognize. I tend to ignore them if I don't recognize them, but there's just so many. So a good thing to do is always be suspicious of an unknown caller. There's a thing called spoofing going on where companies are able to get your phone number and your information, your phone number and your name, and they can get it and post, like on your caller ID, it posts a different company, a company name that seems legit. And so you answer the phone and they start talking to you and you think it's a legit call. And that's called spoofing. And their goal is to get your information. They may ask for your social security number. They may ask for your credit card number, your bank account information, and all of that, you don't want to do. The best thing to do is err on the side of caution these days. And if a so-called, someone is calling from your bank, they say they're with your bank and they're asking for this information, the best thing to do is to disconnect the call and call your bank and ask, like Takesha was saying, ask if they really called you and needed that information. Odds are they didn't call you for that information. They wouldn't call you for that information. So err on the side of caution when it comes to answering your phone by a number you don't know. Definitely try to avoid giving out any personal information. You don't want to do that because like I said, spoofing is going on these days, and people are getting calls from numbers and they seem legit, but chances are they're not. So err on the side of caution with that. And with that, that's all I got. And I'll turn it back over to you, Lena. Thank you.
We're redirecting back now to our consumer services. We want to reiterate once again that the Office of Regulatory Staff's Consumer Services Department is here to help. We are here to help you resolve those issues that you may have with the utility that you have tried to get resolved through them, and you just feel like your voice is not being heard. You feel like no one's understanding the issue that you're having, or you're just simply not able to come to a resolution. I want to make sure that I reiterate that the Consumer Services Department is here to assist you. As it states, the Consumer Services, as I said, alluded to earlier, we serve as a mediator between the customer and the investor-owned utilities here in South Carolina. We are here to informally try and assist you with getting that issue resolved, getting that resolution that you're seeking through the company that you may not have been able to successfully get done on your own. Always know that you have another option when trying to get those issues resolved. We are here. We can handle phone calls that you may make. You can even reach out to us online, and that information, of course, will be posted after the end of this slide. But you can always find that information on our website to reach out to us in the event that you find yourself in need of consumer services. As we alluded to before, you may not actually get that resolution that you're seeking, and you may have to file a formal complaint, or you may have, for some reason, there's some type of public hearing that will be taking place. And what we also want to do is prepare you for that potential event occurring. Next slide, Linda. And what we have here are some tips. If you do find yourself participating in a public hearing, how you can participate. We understand that not everyone shows up in court every day. We understand that this can be an overwhelming situation. And what we want to do is just give a few tips to help make that a little less stressful, a little less overwhelming, and a lot more acceptable and actually able to be done by your regular consumer. Everyone is not an attorney. So we want to make sure that you have an expectation of what you can do to feel more comfortable having your voice heard in a public hearing. Because as a consumer, it is your right to have your voice heard. And we strongly urge consumers, when those times come, to let your voice be heard. One way that you can prepare yourself for that is you simply come early. Come early. That way you have an opportunity to get in, have a seat, settle your nerves, take a look at what's going on, gauge the environment, know what's going on in what's happening, kind of know the order of how things will come. So make sure that you get out early. Sign up. They want to know who's there, who's going to speak. They want to be able to properly prepare for the number of people who will be in attendance. So they're urging people, when you want to come to those public hearings, when you want to participate, make sure that you sign up. Number 3, prepare what you want to say in advance. No one tells your story like you do. And because we understand, as we said before, the situation can be overwhelming. Emotions can run high, and you don't always remember what it is that you want to say. So with that, you take your notes, prepare your speech in advance, put it down on your phone, whatever helps you to make sure that your story is told efficiently and effectively, so that the Public Service Commission and those in attendance can hear the situation that you're dealing with, the better. They can only know what's happening with you, with your environment, with your family, and how it affects you by you telling your story. And you don't want your emotions to get in the way of you being able to articulate your own experience. And that's number 4. Make sure you add your own experience to that. They don't know you. They don't know your particular situation. So it is up to you to tell that story. So when you get in, you make sure all the things that you want to have them to hear, so that they know how this particular situation will affect you, will affect your family. Add your own experience. Let them know how this may affect you. And be sure to speak slowly and clearly. As I said before, emotions run high and your adrenaline is going, your nerves are all out of whack, but you want to make sure that they understand exactly what it is that you're saying. So take your time. It usually is time, but you still have enough time to get your point across if you're speaking slowly and clearly and preparing your message in advance. And sometimes your scheduler just will not allow you to be able to be present during one of those hearings. So we want to make sure that you do know that you can write your experience, write your protest, write your information. On the public service website, they have what's called a letter of protest. On this letter, you have the opportunity to fill all the information out that you would need to fill out, the opportunity to tell your story, the opportunity to voice your opinion on that particular form, send it into the Public Service Commission, and it will serve just as if you were able to physically be in attendance to a particular hearing that may be had. So take advantage of that opportunity in the event that for some reason you can't be present or you're unable to be there. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Landon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And all of the resources that we talked about on today's webinar can be found in this list right here, as well as some other resources as well. And when we send out the slides, these will be hyperlinked so you can visit those websites or have access to those. So I'll go ahead and put up Takesha and Casey's contact information. So you can contact them if you have questions, after the webinar. But right now is the time for an open Q&A. So if you do have a question, feel free to unmute yourself or put that question in the chat box, and we will have Casey or Takesha answer that question. And I'll give folks a moment if they want to unmute or put a question in the chat. Hearing none, I'm going to actually ask a question because I know we talked about specifically when Casey was speaking, she was talking about landline phone service and phone carrier. So when you're talking about water, wastewater, we're talking about what types of companies, what companies fall under these consumer protections and rights. What's the difference, I guess, between like a municipal, that sort of thing?
Okay. Now, as Landon alluded to, we have jurisdiction over the investor owned. You do have those privately owned utilities, and you have municipalities that we do not have direct jurisdiction over. Those particular utilities would have a board that would make up that utility. So when there are questions or concerns, you want to reach out to the board in order to try to get that utility assistance that you may be needing or getting that question resolved. And then in the event that you're not able to get it resolved through that particular utility, you have the right to reach out to your city and or county council person, because they are your elected official. And a lot of the times with the municipal districts, for example, your city of whatever utility, you have your council people who are usually a part of that you can reach out to have your voice heard when you're having some type of issue that you're not able to get resolved.
Awesome. Thank you. I know it's always good to make that clarification because folks kind of lump them all into one bucket, and it can be a little bit confusing, but I'll assure you that if you do have a question, if we don't have direct jurisdiction over that utility, we often have contacts at those utilities or there that we could redirect folks to. So reach out if you do have any questions, and we can try to get you into contact with who you need to be in contact with. And then so Casey, if you're still there, if you can turn back on your camera, just wanted to ask a quick question because I know that you also, this is not directly related to the telecommunications consumer protections or rights, but something that consumers can take advantage of and be able to use, which is a great program that you're involved with as well. The equipment distribution program, I alluded to that earlier in the presentation, but I think it correlates pretty well with what you're talking about with telecom. Could you tell us a little bit more about EDP and what that program does?
Absolutely. Anytime I'm speaking, I always love to drop a line about the South Carolina Equipment Distribution Program. It's a wonderful program. So the Office of Regulatory Staff does administer this program. And basically what we do is provide phone equipment and alerting devices for anyone who lives in the state and has a hearing or speech challenge, and they struggle to communicate over the phone. The equipment that we distribute assists with that by amplifying callers' voices so that they can hear better. We also have an iPad now that serves as a communication device for an individual who's lost their voice. We have electrolarynxes that also give voices back to folks who've maybe been through a laryngectomy procedure. And so we have a lot of different options, but we have different options. So different phones and different alerting devices. And so it all is no cost to the individual as long as they do qualify. To qualify, they would need to live in the state of South Carolina, have the hearing or speech challenge, and then also have phone service, because one does have to have phone service to qualify. And so as long as they meet those requirements, they could apply for the program. We do distribute the equipment. It's shipped right to their door through UPS. And as long as they remain in the state and need the device, we do allow them to keep the device. So it's a great program. It's wonderful, and it doesn't cost anything. So it's really great to be aware of, not only for you, but maybe for someone you may encounter or someone you may know. It's great to be aware of that. So that's a little bit about the equipment distribution program. But if you are interested in receiving applications for that, it is a one-page simple application that we do require a doctor to sign off on. But please feel free to email me, and I would be more than happy to mail you some applications if that sounds like something you would, you or someone you know would benefit from. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Casey. And so I wanted to mention that, last year we had a couple of wastewater cases and rate cases that came up that were before the commission. And we, as an agency with our new mission, very much trying to inform the consumer, give more access to resources of what the utility is asking for, have put out some information when these cases come up, to help the consumer to be more informed. So say if you are going to speak at a public hearing or a virtual hearing, or you want to know how to get involved, you'll have all that information right at your fingertips. So I would encourage you to check our website, or reach out if you have questions about these cases when they come up, and we can direct you to where the information is. Just even if you want to know, what is the impact to my bill as a customer of this utility and as a consumer in the state. We are here to help provide that information, and we'll only be doing that more and more in the future. So we are excited to be able to serve that role. So I will go ahead and thank everyone for attending today's webinar, because I think that this is so important for consumers to be aware that they do have rights. You have a rights as a consumer. You're not just idly sitting and paying the utility or bill. You can take control in some regards of the information that you get. I'll also encourage folks to sign up for our last webinar in the series, which is happening tomorrow, and it is on transportation companies. So if you have an interest in transportation companies and what we at the ORS do in that industry, I would encourage you to sign up for that. We're going to be talking about some of the similar misconceptions or scams or issues that come up, as well as just basics of what we do in the transportation industry. So that is on our website at ors.sc.gov/consumers. Again, we will be posting a recording of the webinar today on the ORS YouTube channel, posting that up on the website, so you can click on the link to get to the recording. And I'll also be sending out an email to all the registrants with the slides attached and a link to that recording. So with that, thank you to Keisha, thank you Casey, and thank you to everyone that attended. And we hope you have a great rest of your National Consumer Protection Week. Thank you very much. Goodbye.